All right, Cooper Turley, DAO extraordinaire. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's jump in like this. I mean, you are not just like any of our other interviews here at Mainnet. We are working with you on something. You are one of our advisors in this media DAO that Decrypt is building out. I'm not even calling it the Decrypt DAO. We're still kind of working on the name. But what's cool about talking to all the people here at Mainnet is everyone is in like a ton of DAOs. Everyone's thinking about this stuff. How do we do decentralized decision making and governance? And we're all kind of working through it in real time. I mean, we've been very transparent at Decrypt about we're in the sandbox. We're not sure about all these things and how they work. I guess I'd start by asking you, is there any amount of hype right now in the DAO space? I mean, everyone's like, DAOs are the future. DAOs are the new form of company. And then when you look under the hood at some things, maybe this certain project doesn't necessarily make sense for a DAO. Where do things stand in terms of that roadmap?
Yeah, I think it's more an ethos than anything. It's the spirit of community ownership and transparency. It's allowing people to get involved with your product in a more meaningful way. I think we're very early maturity-wise on this reaching scale, but people are very excited about the premise, and so that's why you're seeing so many people allocating so much energy towards it.
I mean, we talk a lot about community, but what does it mean to have a community online in a DAO?
Mm-hmm. I think it's blurring the line between team and user. I think at this point in time, people are recognizing that sharing value you create with the people who create it is actually more valuable than trying to silo it to the team that made the product.
Why is that? Why is siloing bad?
I think people want a sense of, I'll use the word ownership again. They want to feel like they belong as a part of this product or roadmap that you're building. And for a while, we've seen that teams were building products to find community. Now we're seeing that communities are building product together.
And what do you see as people start to form DAOs? Is there sort of, do people start to separate into different tiers? People that are super gung-ho, others that are like, and, somewhat involved?
Yeah, so I like to use the rule, 90% of your DAO members will be passive. They won't do anything. 9% will be very sort of on the edges, like contributing at the fringes, and then 1% will be very active contributors.
Do you see that as a problem at all?
Yeah, 1%, that's a slim number.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. I think over time it gets larger, but if you look at it from the lens of everyone is a part of a community, you think about the number of team members relative to the number of users on these social media platforms, 1% is extremely generous. And so you try and look at that 1% number, and a lot of the work that I do is try and slot them into positions where they can become a larger majority of that audience, and so that at some point in time, you look across the board, you now have hundreds of people contributing in some meaningful way. I think that's when you start to see this DAO momentum really take off.
In some ways, it's like any other project in the sense that, or any other form of tech, that there's early adopters who are super, super passionate. It's their whole world. And then there's people who are dipping a toe in. And then over there's the people who it's just too much for them. It's too confusing. They're not going to get in, but probably eventually maybe they will come. If you build it, they will come. How should DAOs go about parceling out those people? I mean, in our media DAO, you can already see there's the people who are in there every day. But then the other problem is the people in our media DAO who are the most knowledgeable about DAOs are also the ones who are stretched the most thin because they're in like 30 different DAOs. So how do they prioritize their time?
I tell teams to really look deep in your own Discord at people who don't have a lot of credibility yet, but they're very eager to find it. And so you look at the people that are in the fringes of your Discord, they're there every day. They might not have a large following on Twitter yet, but if you give them the opportunity to build a brand around the DAO that you're making yourselves, I think that you're going to find they're going to be extremely active in that conversation.
It seems to me that another big or the next big form of crypto tools that are probably going to get VC investment or non-traditional VC investment via DAOs is this sub layer of organizational tools for people who are in multiple DAOs. Like you're in Discord and you see that there's 18 different channels and you've been pinged in all of them. I mean, at some point there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm waiting for kind of something to help me sift through all of the different Discord pings.
Yeah, I think it's about organizational structure. I think from the social level, having a core group of maybe 5 to 7 people you're working actively with on a day-to-day that you then relay to the wider group is kind of a good sentiment. And then specifically with on-chain tools, there's things like Coordinate now to do on-chain compensation models. So you give a team an allocation of tokens, they distribute them amongst themselves. And it's less about making sure each individual person is taken care of on a one-off basis. It's more about creating smaller working groups of trusted individuals to do work together.
What are you seeing as the next step for DAOs? I mean, are we talking about DAOs starting to work together and kind of create mega DAOs?
I think it's more about maturity of individual DAOs. So things like company formation, legal structures, tax structuring, going from a novelty phase of like making a DAO and a token to actually operating as a company, but in a very Web3 native way. So paying people out of a treasury, making sure that they can have healthcare, using things like Coordinate, like I mentioned, to make sure people are getting paid consistently. And then I think you look at this over a 2 to 3 year time horizon, and then we're going to start to see people collaborating more intimately. But right now, as you alluded to, most of the most active DAO members are contributing to many DAOs. And as a result of that, they're bringing mindshare into different communities. They're sharing and cross-pollinating. They're doing guest lectures and whatnot. And I think this sentiment of sharing value amongst the wider DAO community is the exact reason why we're seeing so much momentum today.
What are the pitfalls that you've already seen? I mean, it's still so new, but when we talk about DAOs, everyone you tend to talk to about them because they're in them and they think it's a great new form of technology, they just say, rah, rah, everything's so great, our DAO's awesome, your DAO's awesome. Have you already seen some start to make certain mistakes? What would be the advice you'd give in terms of things to avoid when you're building a DAO early on?
It's a great question. I think trying to move too fast for governance is a mistake. DAO governance needs to be intentionally slow. It's very frustrating because there's various levels of governance participation. So something like allocating a $1,000 budget to renew your website should not be going through a very heavy governance process, but trying to do a treasury raise where you're raising millions of dollars into a community vehicle, that's a fundamentally different conversation. And so separating out the different governance proposals and votes and making sure that there's transparency around it, it takes a lot of time and effort. Traditionally people are very forward about what we want to build, the date that we want to ship it on, but with DAOs there's a lot more open conversation and opinions, and so you need to be ready to go through that cycle.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference when you get into the Discord and there's a whole group of different people from different backgrounds in terms of expectations about time and how quickly we can move. The other thing that everyone has to sort of be aware of in the rear view, the minute you bring in tokens and token allocation, you start to think about, is everyone okay with that? And what I mean by that is regulators. And here we are at this Mainnet conference. Regulation is certainly a giant topic on the minds of everyone in crypto, regardless of which corner of crypto they're in. What do you see happening there? And is it something that, for now, the people in these DAOs are just kind of heads down, we're going to move forward and innovate, and we'll see what happens if they mess with us? Or is it kind of a specter that people are concerned about?
I think that social clubs are a lot more decentralized than what we thought. You go to snapshot proposals and you see anywhere from 300 to 500 people voting on every small nuance. So things like budget allocation to treasury diversification. We're a long ways away from this being like fully decentralized, but when you look across the board at participation amongst members, I think you're actually noticing that these social communities and media organizations are a lot more active because members feel like they have more ownership due to it not needing as much of a technical nature.
But I mean, is the SEC going to come for some of these tokens that are being launched inside DAOs? You say, it's great, we're a DAO, here's what we do, and we give everyone tokens when they vote. And then, oops, the token went up in value if it, is tradable, and suddenly Gary Gensler isn't happy.
Yeah, honestly, I really hope the SEC does come and try and provide guidance here. I think a lot of us in DAOs are just moving forward at such a rapid pace that I invite those conversations to happen. The way that I operate is trying to wait for regulation is going to slow us down. If they are willing to take the time and effort to come and provide guidance on how these communities should be operating, I see that as a very positive thing.
Have you been working with any securities lawyers?
Yeah, there's a lot of law firms that are very ahead in this front. We've been working with a firm called Cooley for our friends with benefits. They helped us with our company formation, tax structuring. I think that for a lot of DAOs, there is a maturity point where it doesn't make sense to allocate budget to those resources until it's at a meaningful stage. But what I notice is that a lot of DAOs will start with like a 3 to 4 month launch period, just get off the ground, get settled and whatnot. They'll run a treasury diversification proposal, which is essentially a fundraise, but it's happening from a treasury. And at that point in time, then I think it makes sense to invite those partners in to make sure that you're all buttoned up and ready to go.
It's so funny. There's just, not to get too philosophical, but early on in crypto, all of the purists and OGs, what they loved about the space was it's outside regulation, it's not government controlled, it's not banks, it's the Wild West, move fast and break things. And now you have people who, even including some of those early types, who are saying, well, bring on regulation, this is good, it'll go mainstream. And there are a lot of people saying, rah, rah, regulation, because it'll make the space more mature and adult and serious. And there's a little bit of a push and pull there.
Yeah, there's definitely a push and pull. I think there's pros and cons to it. I think that we can't operate in the Wild West forever. If we want this to scale to billions of users, we need to have clear guidance here. And so I'm very happy to be out there launching all these experiments, but I recognize that at some point in time, things are going to get very serious. And I think that's a good signal that this is not going away anytime soon.
Any other burning questions we have for our media DAO advisor?
I think that'll do it.
All right,
Great.
Cooper Turley, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was great.